Spiritual death is the separation of man's spirit from God because of sin. Did you hear that? Spiritual death is the separation of man's spirit from God because of sin. So when God says, you shall surely die, that means you shall be cut off from me. This life supplies you get from me, you won't get it. The fellowship you had with me, you won't have it. That means you will not be ruled by your senses. You will not be ruled by your body. So when Adam sinned, he died. He experienced spiritual death. So because he experienced spiritual death, he became conscious of the body. And that was the first time in Genesis chapter 3 when man used the word fear. I heard your voice, I was afraid. Fear was not the language of man before. Because when he was living in the consciousness of the sense God gave him, as a man born of God, there was no sense of fear in his life. Am I communicating? So now, the next one, which is the physical death, that's the one we know about. Physical death is the separation of man's spirit and soul from his body at the point of departing from this world. So if man does not know Christ, who is his savior, and dies physically, the next one comes in, which is the third one, which is eternal death. That's the one that men dread. What will it profit a man to gain the whole world and lose his own soul? That means if a man doesn't know Jesus, if a man is not saved and he dies in his physical body, he says his spirit, soul, and body departs from his body, and then he will not meet God. He is internally separated from God. So we say the man is doomed. Are you hearing that now? So spiritual death is a separation of man's spirit from his body because of sin. For all have sinned and come short, you get that now, of the glory of God. Physical death is the separation of what? Man's spirit from his body at the point of living this world. Okay, let me show you something. Go to James chapter 2. James chapter 2 verse 26. James chapter 2 in verse 26. It says, for as the body without the spirit is what? Is what? It says, so faith without works is death. So he explains to you what death means. The body without the spirit. So the moment the spirit of man departs from him, what has happened? He has died. So that's why when you go to a funeral, this is the body you meet. Is that correct? And they put cotton wool. The man is motionless. The real man, which is the inner man, is gone. But he's not just hovering around. No, he has gone somewhere. For those who know Christ, there's an eternal redemption which gives them access into God's presence. But for those who don't know Christ, they are doomed forever. You know, there's an argument. Is hell real? No, that should not be even what we'll be asking about. You should be asking about the final destination of the human soul that doesn't know God, which is the lake of fire. It's different from hell. Hell is akara, just small, small preparation. The main place is hell, the lake of fire. Are you aware of that? Okay, let me show you something. Go to chapter 20 of Revelation, in verse 12 to verse 15. Chapter 20 of Revelation in verse 12, from verse 12. Are we there? Chapter 20 of Revelation from verse 12. Okay. It says, and I saw the dead, small and great, stand before God. And the books were open. And another book was open, which is the what? The book of life. And the dead were judged out of those things which were written in the books, according to their works. The next verse, verse 13. And the sea gave up the dead which were in it, and death and hell, watch those words, death and hell did what? Delivered up the dead which were in them, and they were judged, every man according to their what? To their works. The next verse, verse 14. And death and hell were cast into the lake of fire. Death and hell will be cast into the lake of fire, which is what? Second death, final death. Now go to the next verse, verse 15. And whosoever was not found written in the book of life was cast into the lake of fire. So hell is a smaller place. Lake of fire is the final destination. Is that clear now? So we now understand that the spiritual death Bible talks about is when man's spirit was separated from God because of sin. In Ezekiel chapter 18 verse 20, he said, the soul that sinneth, it shall die. For the wages of sin is death. Is that clear now? So that's to tell us that death entered this world through that man Adam because of his disobedience. So the consequence of sin that he sinned was what? Was death. Because the soul that sinned, it shall die.